So for me, being the first woman, I mean, one of the legacies that I want to leave is that I am demonstrating and paving the way for more women who work for the Y to see themselves in leadership positions. Almost 50% of our staff across the country are women, but only 30% are in CEO positions. So we've got a ways to go. And when I meet with young staff across the country, especially young women, I forget that they don't see enough examples of women in leadership until I'm there and they share with me how meaningful it is for them to see a woman in this position. And I will start with a piece of advice. And this is a piece of advice that I give my two young adult children regularly. I have a 21-year-old daughter and a 23-year-old son. And what I say to them is the most important person to be loved by in the world is yourself. And I've always encouraged them to cultivate a love of self, not in a narcissistic way. And I remember exactly where I was and what I was doing the first time that a thought crossed my mind where I thought I could lead an organization. And I can't remember exactly how old I was, but I know that I was driving and the radio was on and they were announcing a new, at the time it was an executive director, I don't think the title was president and CEO of this nonprofit organization in our community. So they were announcing this new leader.
Welcome to On Board with Transparent Leadership. I am Kendra Davenport, President and CEO of Easter Seals, and I'm thrilled to be joined today by Suzanne McCormick, who is my counterpart at YMCA US. So welcome, Suzanne. Happy to have you here.
Thank you, Kendra. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
I have been as well, because you and I have the benefit of having met last summer, being introduced by actually one of our former CEOs, and we've had the pleasure of enjoying some dinners together and wine. And I've been dying to have this conversation with you so we can share with listeners some of the tips and tricks and tools of the trade, because I really think as the first female leader of the Y, you're breaking new ground. And I would love for you first to start off by just sharing with our listeners a little bit about the Y and what makes it unique. I know you guys have been around even longer than we have, so over to you.
Well, the Y is, we are soon to celebrate our 175th anniversary here in the United States. The first YMCW was actually started in England, and then it came to the U.S. about 5 or 6 years later. And our focus is on strengthening families, members of all generations, from little babies to senior citizens, with a focus on 3 areas. We say healthy mind, body, and spirit. And so we look holistically about how to make kids stronger, make individuals stronger, and ultimately to make communities stronger. And we do that through all kinds of recreational programs. We're the largest nonprofit provider of childcare in the United States. We're also the largest nonprofit provider of out-of-school time for young kids or school-age kids. And then we just do a ton of other community-based programming, depending on what a community needs from its Y.
Great overview. Thank you. Is there one thing about the Y you think people don't get right or just don't understand that you wish more people knew?
I think most people think the Y is only a gym or a place to go swim. And while those two things are true, and often that is the first experience someone has with the Y, as I already said, we do so much more than that. We really are, physical health is but one aspect of what we focus on. We want families and kids to be strong through all dimensions. And so when I meet people and they say, I go to my Y, and they tell me about their experience, as we start to talk about the other work, sometimes they are completely amazed. We have some YMCAs in the country, for example, who are doing housing development projects. Again, it all depends on what a community needs, and a Y is really good at filling the gaps in communities.
You and I have talked about our personal experiences with the Y, and I think I remember sharing with you that my mom, God rest her soul, went to the Y almost religiously to swim. And we used to joke around in my family, how much swimming was she really doing? It was really more, I think, socialization. So can you share a little bit about that? Because I think institutions, and the Y is an institution, are so critical to the fabric of our society. And I think that's one of the things that gets missed, is what a sense of community and a sort of a center Ys are for communities, big, large, urban, peri-urban. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, I feel like I have met in my travels many seniors who emulate your mother, I would say. I'm actually, when you said that to me, I was recalling a visit to the YMCA in Anchorage, Alaska, which I was there about this time last year. And one of the people I met was a 99-year-old woman who was in the pool. She was in the pool doing water aerobics with about 35 other seniors. And I knelt down on the pool deck, and she came over and she took my hand and introduced herself. And then we talked about coming to the Y. And she said, well, as soon as I'm done, I'll come out of the pool. And there's a community room that's actually named after her because, like your mother, she does go and exercise, but she spends probably more time post exercise in the community room, drinking coffee and socializing with the other seniors. And that's the place they go. It's the place they feel safe. It's where they belong. And I've seen that scene repeated in San Diego, California, in Athens, Georgia. I mean, that is like seniors. It's a safe place for them to go and to keep up their health, both physical and mental, and then just to hang out and be with their friends. I think that's some of the, we say it's like the secret sauce of the Y, is it's the place where people can go and it's like feel like they belong.
Truly. And I'll add another interesting factoid that I think to me really distinguishes the Y and how inclusive you strive to be. And that's that my mother's best friend, who's also since passed away in the past few years, Barbara, was confined to a wheelchair. She used a wheelchair most of her adult life after having had polio as an adolescent. And it was Barbara who introduced my mom to the Y and said, you should come swim. And my mom said, well, how do you navigate getting in the pool? And she said, they have a lift, and they've had one. And that was more than 20 years ago, Suzanne. So I love that. And I wanted to tell our listeners that. I touched on it at the beginning of our talk. You are the first female to lead the Y. Can you talk a little bit about how the experience started, how it's going, and maybe what you see on the horizon?
When people ask me that question, the other thing about myself that I always try to point out as well, because it's another dynamic that impacts I think how I lead and also how my leadership is experienced or received. In addition to being the first woman, I am one of but a very few leaders of the YUSA who have never worked for the Y. This is my first.
So you're an outsider.
I am an outsider, and I'm an outsider and a woman. So depending on who you talk to, that's either 2 strikes against me or it's 2 points in my favor. But it is not surprisingly, it's, an organization that is the YMCA, Young Men's Christian Association, by our origins, started to serve men. It was led by men. And so, that's part of our history. Still, though, I think, and so there's still a majority of our leaders of YMCAs are still men. And I would say, I think we're at a point in society, it's probably disproportionate. It is disproportionate to what our population looks like. We need more women leaders. So for me, being the first woman, I mean, one of the legacies that I want to leave is that I am demonstrating and paving the way for more women who work for the Y to see themselves in leadership positions. Almost 50% of our staff across the country are women, but only 30% are in CEO positions. So we've got a ways to go. And when I meet with young staff across the country, especially young women, I forget that they don't see enough examples of women in leadership until I'm there and they share with me how meaningful it is for them to see a woman in this position. So while I like to, and I always try to say, like, I just want to be seen as a leader, I recognize the importance for the women, younger women, to see a female leader. And I think I don't know that it's because I'm a female. I think I have a different leadership style than some of my predecessors, which some might like equate to being a woman. I don't think so. I think I follow a facilitative leadership style or collaborative leadership style. And that's a style that some folks are still learning.
I'm pulling up on my phone because I always forget the author, but I have been listening to on audiobooks When Women Lead by Julia Borstein. And I think much of what you said, she underscores. It's a terrific book. But one of the things you touched on a little bit is that young women don't have enough female examples in leadership positions. And you and I have talked many times about our counterparts. And if you look at some of the largest NGOs in the country, they're run by people like you and me, women in their 50s, in their early 60s. And you and I privately have reflected, on the sacrifices and the trade-offs that we make to do these jobs. And I think you're like me, you wouldn't trade it, but can you talk, I don't want to get too personal, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'd love for our listeners to know about what some of those things have been for you, how you've overcome them. And if you frame it as advice you would give to a young woman who is maybe 5-10 years into her career. And that's, I think, from my perspective, where things really started to get tough when you're juggling a family and you're juggling, co-parenting and you're juggling 2 jobs, 2 careers. Can you talk a little bit about that and what some of those challenges have been to you or that you've had to overcome?
Yes. And I will start with a piece of advice. So this is a piece of advice that I give my 2 young adult children regularly. I have a 21-year-old daughter and a 23-year-old son. And what I say to them is the most important person to be loved by in the world is yourself. And I've always encouraged them to cultivate a love of self, not in a narcissistic way, but an appreciation of yourself and a comfort with yourself. Because what I've said to them, this is maybe a little morbid, I'm like, the only person you're guaranteed to spend the rest of your life with is yourself. And so you have to know that you can rely on your sense of self and your love of self to get you through challenging or hard times. And I say that because I anchor back to that whenever I'm in challenging situations where we're going back to being the first woman, when you have to put up with a lot of criticism or there's a lot of critique or there's a million people who think they can do your job better than you, I have to rely on, I'm okay. Like I gotta be kind to myself. But talking about the challenges, yeah, I mean, I think nowadays, it's probably challenging for both men and women as you think about how to be successful in your career, but also want to be successful in the other parts of your life that are important to you, whether it is with a family, as a parent or as a caregiver to a family member. And again, I think what I've learned is you got to give yourself grace and know that you cannot be perfect in all of those dimensions at the same time. And that you go through, at least for me, I go through cycles of, okay, I feel really good about how I'm doing in my job, but I kind of stink right now at being a wife or being a mom or being present. And when I get that feeling, then I just try to think about, well, how do I
balance that.
that balance that, or kind of soft, like come out from like being really low and kind of get to this middle place. The other thing that I know now that this is a privilege of being a leader, is I can be very forthright with saying I'm going to not do this right now because I need to spend time with my family. I tried to model that very early in my first CEO job I got when I was 35. And I was always totally transparent with my calendar, so my team could see, like, if I had to go pick up my kids, like I didn't want to hide the fact that I was a mom too, and that I was trying to do that well. And over time, that was a vulnerability on my part, but over time, and I continue to hear this even now, your team appreciates that because you're giving them permission to be all the other things that they are in their life as well.
So true.
Yeah.
So true. And I think you and I have shared similarities in the way we cope and the way we manage. And the transparency is something that I am very, very committed to for the same reasons as well as others. I just think there's no place for opacity in leadership. I think the more opaque you are.
And don't apologize for it either. I mean, and again, I think that comes with, it's way easier when you've got this many years and this much experience. But I do say to people, like, I'll be you can see hair appointment on my calendar. If you, I don't hide that stuff because I'm like, that's just part of being a person. And
that is a perfect segue to my next question or line of discussion for us. And that is a feeling I have, and I don't dwell on it, but I do have it, that working writ large for women is more challenging by virtue of the fact that so much more is expected of us. And, sorry guys, this is the way I feel. We're not expected just to come to work and do a good job, do better than a good job, but we're expected to look the part. And I think that can be very, very daunting for anyone, even those of us with a strong, as my kids would say, strong sense of self, a lot of self-confidence. There are moments, and I had one this morning as I was putting a video together. On the fly, always trying to do too many things. And we'll get to that too, how we balance, because sometimes I feel, as you said, I'm not doing a great job of balancing, and I am the one that suffers. But as I put the video together, that's going to go out to our affiliate network, so hundreds of people will see it. And it was done okay. I didn't flub any lines. I tend to speak directly from the heart and extemporaneously. But what I obsessed over the entire way to work on my walk in was how old and how tired I look. And I wonder, I just don't think our male counterparts have those conversations with self about, is my hair done? Do I look tired? Do I have my makeup on right? Am I wearing the same clothes too often? Do I look the part? Do you ever have those feelings, or are you much more self-actualized than I am?
Well, I will say, like, again, with time and experience, I've gotten to the place where I'm like, it doesn't matter as much anymore to me. Having said that, I will be the first to watch my video and say, oh my gosh, the circles under my eyes, or the
yes,
why do I look so tired? But I do, in moments like that, I try to connect myself back to one of my earlier experiences when I was fairly fresh in my career. I think I was probably 27, 28 years. And I was working for a nonprofit organization, and I was advancing in my career to a place where I was actually allowed to come to the board meetings of the organization, and it had a very, very well-respected board of community leaders. And one of the women on the board that was the most revered and respected was still like probably now 10 or 11 years my senior now. And she was retired, and her name was Betsy Ann Holmes. And I remember watching her with her, she wore readers, which, I, at the time, but the way she used her readers, and she would like stare down people. And she had gray hair, but she was lovely. And I thought she was the most beautiful woman in the world because she commanded a room. She was so well respected. And so she gave me this image of seasoned experience that I coach myself. I'm like, okay, you're getting closer to becoming Betsy Ann Holmes when you look older.
Right.
And that's how I'm navigating that space now, Kendra. I'm like, oh, I'm becoming that, confident senior who
That
others
seasoned professional
who people can still look up to, even though you look older. Because it wasn't like that was part of what I loved about her was she was exquisite even in her age. So that's what I aspire to still have the.
I love that.
It's less about your physical looks, and it's more about the presence that you bring to your work.
I love that. And I love that there are pivotal women who come in and out of our lives from whom we take a little bit like that and think, okay, I'm going to apply that. And I can remember I went to an all women's Catholic college. And at the end of my, I don't know, junior or senior, I think it was junior year, we had speakers come in. And Caroline Stewart Lacey was a speaker who came in. And I felt the same way about her as you just described, feeling about your fellow board member. She was so polished. She was much older than I was. Obviously, I was in college, but she was what I wanted to aspire to be, right down to her, black patent leather pumps at the time. I just thought, wow, she's so professional. She was the business buzz columnist at the time for the Philadelphia Inquirer. And she and I have stayed in touch, and she remains sort of a touchstone. And at the time, so young, hadn't even started my career, I remember thinking I want to emulate her. And I think there are definitely, young women out there who look at the landscape and think, I can't even afford to buy a house. How am I going to get to a point where I can actually think about leading an organization? So if you think about the pragmatic things you did, and I think you and I have probably shared, a lot of luck happens, a lot of happenstance. You're in the right place in the right time. Someone champions you. But if you were going to give that pragmatic advice to someone who says, I want to be a female CEO someday, but here's what I'm grappling with. How do I get there? What are some of the tips or tricks that you did that you look back on and think that really helped me propel me to where I am now and help me achieve my goals? What would those be?
3 things immediately came to mind. The first is eventually you have to get to a place where you can envision yourself there. And I remember exactly where I was and what I was doing the first time that a thought crossed my mind where I thought I could lead an organization. And I can't remember exactly how old I was, but I know that I was driving and the radio was on and they were announcing at the time it was an executive director. I don't think the title was president and CEO of this nonprofit organization in our community. So they were announcing this new leader and I knew him and I had an opinion on his capability. And I heard that he had gotten this job and I thought, oh my God, if he can do that, I can do that. I can do that. And I'll never, and ironically, my first CEO job was of that organization when I was 35 years old. But to get there were 2 other things. One was an event and the other was a mindset. I definitely was raised in the generation of you got to work your way up and prove yourself. And you have to go above and beyond. And nothing is given, everything is earned. And so I really did have that mindset of I always wanted to learn the next job. And I wanted to learn the jobs around me. And after a period of time, once I felt like I mastered something, I would look to do something more or take on more responsibility. And that mattered because it gave other people visibility into my initiative and my ability to contribute in multiple ways. But probably one of the hardest things I did was in an organization. I had worked there for 8.5 years. I had worked my way up into multiple roles, and I got to a place where there was no place else to go except like the CFO or the CEO. And I wasn't ready for either one of those. But I knew that I needed more experience. So I decided to leave. And I left that organization and I went to another organization where I could take on additional responsibility. And that move allowed me, again, eventually to come back to that organization as the CEO eventually, because I knew that's what I wanted, but I knew that I was going to have to go get more experience. So I had to step out of the comfort of that organization and kind of start fresh on a different level in a different organization.
Great example. Do you consider yourself ambitious?
Yes. I am. I think this is going to sound, I feel like I'm a humble leader, but I am definitely ambitious. I'm very competitive. I like to achieve things. And so, yes, I have to say that I am ambitious.
There's a reason I asked that. And the follow-up question is grounded in the notion. And I actually think it's more than a notion because I've experienced it so many times, because I too think I am an ambitious female and I want to advance. I want to do more. I live by the axiom, making the most of every day. I really want to go to sleep every night and think I didn't squander that day. I might be exhausted, but made the most of it. And that I help people, all of the good things, that I was humble or that I brought my best self to that. But I can remember vividly times when my ambition was used against me, was weaponized, if you will. I hate that word, but it's a perfect word for it. And I can remember one instance very, very clearly, not so long ago, when I went in for my performance evaluation and my CEO said to me, well, no one can deny you're doing a great job. And I thought, okay, where is this going? And he then said, but you're so aggressive and you're brash. And it took me a long time to get over that because I thought, I really, in retrospect, I kept thinking, am I aggressive or am I assertive? Am I brash or do I have strong opinions that I'm not afraid to share? And I've squared, the conversation in my head. I know now what triggered it and what my reaction was to it was appropriate. I think that situation, that experience has been likely experienced by every woman who, identifies as being ambitious. Do you have any of those? Have you had any of those experiences? And if so, can you share one with us?
I can't recall one that was as overt as that, Kendra. But I want to make a comment on that, as I think, when you said that, I immediately asked myself what I think women ask ourselves all the time now. Would he have said that to me if I was a man?
Right.
No, probably not. Although, that's why you do need good friends and colleagues and mentors around you that you can check in on it to say, was there something in there that I should be aware of?
Right.
And if the answer is no, then you chalk it up to, he would not have said that to me if I was a man. I early in my career, this is what came to mind. It was not nearly that overt, and I'm going to tell you what I did about it. I was not as assertive. I was reporting to a man, and I was in that kind of situation where I felt like I am doing his job for him and he is getting all the credit. And it was starting to make my blood boil and it was also, he was so patronizing, he was doing me the favor. And I got to this point where I was like, I am doing half of his job. And so my assertiveness was eventually, I went to the CEO and I said, so my my example might be a little bit opposite of yours. I went, and it was a female CEO too, and she was a strong, assertive leader too. And I went to her and I made the case that I felt like she should separate his responsibilities into two roles. And I had a good business case for it too, because the one part of the work, there were two different kinds of work. Long story short, I made the case and she said yes. And she let me do it. But as I reflect on your story and my experience, I think if it had been a male leader, I don't think it would have happened. I really do think, because it was a strong female leader who saw something, who related, that she rewarded me. I think it could have gone the other way if it had been, because gender definitely played out much more so 25 years ago than it does
Absolutely.
now. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think we're making progress.
Yeah.
I do think we're making progress, but I do think there are still inherent challenges that women experience that men don't.
Well, and I will tell you though, sometimes when I am with, like in my current environment, I'll have to even dial up the volume on my own assertiveness sometimes, because you have to match the energy in the room sometimes.
Yes,
not always.
Sure.
And I do not subscribe to playing into somebody else's style all the time. But if I feel like I'm starting to get like pushed around a little bit, I'll square my shoulders and sit up a little high.
You square those shoulders.
Yeah.
Let's talk about juxtaposition of ambition. And you touched on it, humility. Can you share a time when you think I really blew it? One of your biggest failures, and how you rebounded from that, what you took away, what you learned from it, how you avoided it?
One of my biggest professional failures was I was leading an organization and took a big risk in terms of committing us to, it was an organization that was not good at fundraising. And I took a big risk on putting our name on an event. And I like hook, line, and sinker, the person who convinced me that this was going to be a no-brainer, this was a no-fail opportunity for my organization to put their name on this event. It was a concert on a pier downtown. Long story short, it failed miserably. And it failed to the tune of, like, we lost, this was a lot then. It was like $75,000. And I had to own that. I'm the one who convinced the board that we should do it. And it was a dismal failure by any measure. Any measure. I learned a lot. Like, I did learn a lot, but I lost some credibility for a while with my board, and I had to take a much more sort of conservative stance for a while. That was it was a big fail. It was a big fail. But I've had other failures too. And I think that's one of the questions I always ask people when I'm interviewing to hire onto my team is I always say that too. Tell me about one of your failures. And I don't want to hear about a personal failure. I want to hear about a professional failure. And how someone answers that question, it's one of the most important questions for me, because if someone cannot admit failure, truly admit it, then I don't want them on my team, because it happens, and you have
I couldn't agree more. And I think some of those big failures they teach you so much more than just the gist of the failure and what you'll do, and in the future to avoid that, or to, as you said, to a more conservative stance. It influences you professionally going forward. And I appreciate you sharing that vulnerability. That vulnerability, I think, is how we inculcate in up and coming female leaders the opportunity to be themselves.
I would say
that no one's perfect all the time.
That's one of the easier ones, because it was like operational decisions. I mean, I think the other failures that feel more poignant to me, that are probably harder to talk about, are the ones when I feel like I've failed someone on my team, either how I treated them, or
Yes.
how the organization treated them, or, like rethinking decisions on things, like not giving the right feedback or giving the wrong, like those are the ones that like stick with me. Like I got over the 75,000 because it was, it's the people ones that stick with you.
Oh, I agree. And I think in a previous role, I can remember celebrating one part of my team's success and doing a little impromptu like wine and cheese for them. But I did it in the same area where other people were working and invited some, not all. And halfway through, I looked over at people at their desks while we were having wine and cheese not so far away and thought this was a big fail because of what you just said, because of the way I unintentionally made people feel, they're enjoying themselves, but here I am I not as important? Is my work not as valued? And they're partying, having a great time, and I'm still trying to close out our day's work. I apologized for that to my entire team and made a mental note to be more careful going forward about people's feelings. And I agree, I've had plenty of professional failures, but the ones that stick with me as well are when I feel I let people down.
Yeah.
People close to me, people that I trust and that I rely on. So it's a lot. It's a balancing act. Leadership, I think at any level, is a balancing act. Can you talk a little bit about how you stay buoyant, how you keep yourself going, what you do to recharge professionally and personally?
Well, I was asked this question recently. I was on a panel. I'm going to give the same three because of the things that come to mind, and they're not very exciting. I say it's kind of back to basics. I need sleep. Like I am a 7 to 8 hour a night sleeper. Like if I don't get that, I can feel it. So sleep it's a necessity and one of my secret weapons. I also have found my way back to running, which was always like not always an important part of my life, but my adult life. And so I've gotten religious around my running again. It's the best part of every day. And unfortunately, it's usually over by 7:30. And when I'm running, I'm always like, this is the best part of the day. This is the best part of the day. And then the other kind of quirky thing, but I actually believe that it helps my brain heal, is when I'm home, I almost always have 1,000-piece puzzle going. And I do puzzles and I dream in puzzles, and it's just a way for my mind to relax. So those are it's very boring and dorkish, but
no, I think we're kindred spirits because I'm a puzzler as well. And there is a puzzle gathering dust because I alternate between needlepoint and puzzling. Sounds so esoteric. I sound like I'm 90, but those are the things that keep me grounded, right? Those are definitely the things that help me come down.
Yeah.
Tell us, if you can, one thing that no one can Google about you. What's something that you can share that no one really knows?
Can it be anything?
Anything, yes.
If you're sitting on this side of me and you look closely, you can see that I had my nose pierced. I
didn't think we'd get this good.
Okay, well, I'm trying to come up with something new and original. When I was finished with my Peace Corps service, I met up with four of my friends we met in Calcutta, India, and we spent a couple days there, and then we went to Nepal, and we spent 6 weeks in Nepal before we came back to India. And on the night that we were leaving Nepal, we had like a late flight back to India, and, we were out, and my closest friend and we had been talking about it, but we went and had a couple beers, and we went and got our noses pierced. And so we came back from the Peace Corps with little diamonds in our noses.
That is fabulous. And I can't wait to delve more into this side of Suzanne the next time we meet. Oh my gosh, I love that. I love that story. So,
but after that, maybe you will be able to Google that about me.
Now we can. Now it's out there. Now it's going to be out there. You have achieved so much, and I'm wondering, is there something still unconquered? Is there something looming that you say, well, I'd like to do that before I call it quits? Not that you are, but But is there anything that, and maybe it's not even in a professional capacity, maybe it's in a voluntary capacity, maybe it's utilizing the experience, you've gained. Is there something on the horizon for you that you would like to do?
There's not on the immediate horizon, but I will say that there are three things that I have thought about enough times in my life that, and I don't think that I'm going to do all three of them. I may do none of them, but I will, if I am like on my deathbed and conscious and talking, and like if one of my kids said, "Mom, is there anything that you thought you were going to do?" Or I'm just going to be honest. One, I always thought I wanted to like write a book, and I wanted to write a book about my Peace Corps experience, because I have boxes of every single letter I wrote to my parents. They gave them back to me. Every single letter I wrote to my husband, who was my like sort of boyfriend at the time, to my siblings, and I have every letter that they wrote back to me. So I have like this treasure of letters, and I always thought, could this be like a cool story? So that's one thing. I also, this is probably the most realistic. I have contemplated like my last hurrah, my last job. I thought maybe I wanted to go be what I call a country director for the Peace Corps, like go, and because it's like a 5-year stint, and you go run the program in the country. And then the other is I always thought I might want to run for the U.S. Senate. And that's probably the one that I won't do.
Oh, that's the one I hope you do. And now that's going to be the basis for our next dinner conversation. Trust me, I'm so glad we're mining all this data, the nose piercing, the
I know
campaign. This is great. One of the things I remember so vividly about the first time we met was that we shared super similar experiences. And I think I asked you, so do you live here in Chicago? And you said, oh, no, I don't. I commute here. And I thought, oh, my God, we're doing the same thing. And I said, well, I commute here. I commute to Chicago, where Easter Seals is based, and the Y is based in Chicago. I'm doing it from Virginia. Where are you doing it from? And you said Florida. And I think my jaw dropped, because I thought, wow, not only are we kindred spirits doing the same thing, but you're doing a longer commute than I am. Your organization is arguably 10 times larger than Easter Seals, which leads me to my next question. And you brought him up. You said your then sort of boyfriend, now husband. I think it takes a really supportive partner to make something like this work. And you and I have talked about this privately. Can you share your feelings on it? Maybe you agree, maybe you don't. You disagree with me, but how do you make that work?
I agree with you 100%. And I think, so my husband and I, we celebrate our 30th anniversary this year. And I didn't tell you this, that we're actually leaving on Thursday to go to Ireland for our,
oh my gosh,
I know, to celebrate our 30th with my sister-in-law and her husband. You could ask both of us this question. I think we would answer it very similarly. Is I think maybe we recognize it more now than we did when we were in the moment. But when we look back on it's 30 plus years, we have each had to step up differently at different times to support the other based on where they were in their professional career and their experience. And I think it's fair to say, and I think Bill, who's my husband, would say that there was a point when he was really building his business. He's a physical therapist, was a partner, and they built a very large, successful physical therapy practice, where I had to carry a lot of the heavy at-home water, and that allowed him to really be, 500% into building that. And still, I was doing my own career. As you said, I was ambitious, taking care of the kids. And then at some point it shifted, and he got to a place where he started to think about, okay, I'm not going to put that much energy into it anymore. I mean, it was really like a mental, physical moment for him. And it was after he made that decision that it became much easier for him to think about, okay, how can I support you to do everything you want to do in your career? And I would not be where I am if we had not had that swap off. We moved to Florida for me to take a new big job. And we were only able to do that because he was ready to dial it back, which ended up being hugely amazing for he and our kids. Like that gave him a chance to play a bit of a different role. And I couldn't do my job now without, him being supportive. But he used to always say, and it's so true, he would say, he's like, Suze, I'm your phone booth, meaning like Wonder Woman or Superwoman or Superman, you have to go into the phone booth to change your, like, out of your ordinary. And I was like, you are my phone booth.
I love that. And I know, I just listening to you and hearing the passion in your voice for what you do. I'd love to know what you consider to be the best part of your job. What enthuses you more than anything? Knowing that there are a myriad of things, there would have to be, but what is it that is really the thing that motivates and moves you most?
Well, I think this is based on the conversations we've had. I think this may be similar for you as well, is because we talk about like when you feel like you're mired in too much of the internal operations, or it's starting to feel like, oh, this is hard and annoying, or it's like getting out and seeing the work of the YMCA's on the ground, like seeing
100%.
Y team members
100%,
interacting with kids or seniors, like that's all you need to say, I'm going at it again for, at 100+%. And it's just like seeing the work in action. That's the greatest motivator.
I agree. And you're right. We have talked a lot about this.
Yeah.
That I feel that time in the field, as I call it, is the most motivational. And I often find myself so moved by people's stories, and not just the participants, but the staff members. And I know your teams share that in common with many people at Easter Sales who have been around for decades and stick with the mission. And it's hard not to be inspired by that. I knew I would enjoy this conversation so much. And I think before we close out, we got a couple more things to do. Is there anything you'd like to share about the why that you really want people to know?
If you don't know, I mean, I want to challenge people to get to know their why beyond what their personal experience is, because there's a myriad of things that whys do that people, they just go in sometimes. Like I see people come in and they punch their card and they go do their thing and they don't look around. And the real opportunity at a why is to look around and to see what else is happening and to be curious about it and be curious and explore. Is it something you want to be a part of, either as a giver or a getter, I would say.
I love that. Where can people go to find out more about the why?
I think just ymca.org is the best place. That's our general website. And you can find your why there.
We like to end all of these segments with an Ask Me Anything question. But before I get to that, I have one final question for you, Suzanne. And anybody who knows me knows I read constantly. Unlike you, I don't require, I probably require 8 hours of sleep. I don't get 8 hours of sleep. I have a hard time sleeping. So I'm often reading, and I read 3 or 4 books at a time. Some don't, some take years to finish depending on how interested I am, but others I rapidly go through, and I read everything from fiction to self-help to workbooks to biographies of leaders to professional development stuff. Is there something you're reading now that you can share with our listeners that you're really enjoying, or an audiobook you're listening to?
2 things I would share. One is a book that I just finished over the weekend, and it's called Trust. And it's fiction. It is a super smart book. It's not an easy read, but it is so smart. Like it's like 4 different novels in a novel, and has an ending that's just really fascinating. I mean, I'm still marveling.
Herman Diaz, is that the author?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Trust by Herman Diaz.
Yes, that's it. Yes.
Excellent.
And then the other is one that I'm listening to, and because this was recommended to me by one of my executive team members. It's called The Friction Project. And it is by Robert Sutton. It's how smart leaders make the right things easier and the wrong things harder in an organization. So it's about the friction fixers, like the people who fix friction, and then the people who like perpetuate the friction. It's really interesting.
That makes me think of something my husband has always talked to me about, and that's he refers to it as rock management. And rock management is, bring me a rock. Okay, not that rock. I want another rock. I don't want that rock. That's not the rock I envisioned. So it's kind of similar. And thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for your candor and your vulnerability and for just being you. I so enjoy our time together, enjoy, collaborating with you. Look forward to doing a lot more of that, but I'm very grateful that you made the time today to talk with me on this podcast.
Well, the feeling is mutual. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Leaders are sometimes in a tough spot. What advice would you offer to leaders out there who are addressing tension between organizational strategy and their team's emotions? This is a really a good question because it's a very tricky balance. I think organizational strategy is the roadmap. It's how you get from point A to point B, C, D, E, wherever you want to go. And that map is important. But I think to get there, you have to ensure that your staff feels supported and valued. And that requires listening. It requires listening to people's opinions. And I would have to say, if there's something that I need to work on, it is listening first and more and more intently. I think at times in my haste to get things done and move the ball down the field, advance our progress, I am quick to judge. I am quick to come up with, okay, this is how I feel, or shoot somebody down. And if leaders do that too quickly, as I often do, and I think I come around, I try anyway to come around, but I'm really making a concerted effort to listen more, to not give my opinion instantly, and to not shoot somebody down so quickly. And when I do, I kind of do this mental dance with myself where I say, okay, call that back and have a do-over there and say, or if I do feel really strongly about something, at least let someone explain to me why they feel the way they do, why their opinion differs from my own. Creating those safe spaces is very important because you don't want a lot of yes people in the room. You don't want people to just assent and consent just to get going, just to get on with their day. You want people to push back and really offer differing opinions. And if you don't have that, then you're operating in an echo chamber, and that isn't helpful to anyone, but especially to your team, because people don't stay if they don't feel valued. And yet I think many leaders, myself included, are balancing so many things that it can be tricky to ensure that your team's emotions are where yours are. And oftentimes, my children used to say, Mom, you breathe and create work. And I take that to heart because I never want my team to feel like I'm just dumping things I don't want to do or that I don't have time for on their shoulders. But I am from the school of hard knocks that you got to do everything yourself at least once or for a period of time before you can move on to greener pastures where you're not dealing with the drudgery of day-to-day stuff. And yet every job has that stuff. So taking the time to ensure that your team's on board and that they feel good about their contributions, I think, is how you square that tension between addressing organizational strategy and supporting your team's emotions and intellectual buy-in and professional development. It really calls upon all of us to be human and to understand that our teams are human. Easter Seals empowers people with disabilities and their families to be full and equal participants in their communities and within society. Easter Seals is where everyone can feel welcomed and people know that they aren't judged, but treated with the dignity that they deserve. Each day, we provide life-changing services nationwide and advocate for policies that improve quality of life. From employment to housing services to job training, childcare and respite care, adult day programs, and so much more, Easter Seals is making a profound impact in thousands of communities every day. You can learn more by visiting easterseals.com. That concludes our episode. Thank you so much for listening. If you like what you heard, be sure to write a review, like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to join us in the next episode as we discuss how we can all get on board with transparent leadership.